today we are building my very best Warhammer 40k diorama. After originally deciding to make a small scale diorama, I pondered and decided no longer will I make a tiny diorama, it's time to do a full scale Warhammer 40,000 diorama. And I found this really cool box kit that resembles an old time gothic cathedral. That will be the foundation of our real clock tower. And to start, I had to remove a lot of the iconography, as this will be where we'll be putting our real watch later on. And recently I actually bought my first ever FDM 3D printer, which for our first project we're going to be printing a lovely base fit to the exact measurements of this clock tower cathedral. And coming from a background of resin 3D printing, this was so much more fun in a lot of ways. It was just cool to watch it build this own thing out of nothing. And we have our two platforms for the diorama. And of course, to get up to the door we're going to need some stairs, so I carefully clipped some stairs together. But first let's put our gloves on because it's clay time. And for the first ever time I'm venturing away from Dad's Air Trying clay and trying out Hobbycraft's own store brand just to see if it's any different. And right off the bat, oh boy, is this a whole different type of clay, because this is so sticky. While Dad's air drying clay was kind of, as you'd imagine, felt like a clay. This felt like clay mixed with PVA and white glue. At first I actually kind of hated it, but there's one actual huge benefit to this. We don't need to have anchor points to hold the clay in. It's so sticky I can just slap it all over the place, and it actually kind of worked a treat. So the next thing we need to do is add all of our accessories to the diorama, in this case like the staircase, and these little plastic graves I found in my bits box. That are going to look perfect for this gothic aesthetic. So to make this clay look less like clay, we're going to add some of my favourite ever VMS Smart Mud, which is actually a clay, funnily enough. But it literally looks like real earth, and we're going to slather this whole diorama in the stuff to add our nice dirty base layer. The only thing like the other clay, it is so damn sticky. It will stick to my gloves and I'll have to keep changing them, and once it gets too stuck on there, you'll start removing the clay with the clay. But I think it's worth it in the end because it has such a cool look. And while the clay hasn't dried yet, it's time to get our knife back out and slowly remove all of the clay from the stairs and the graves, while still trying to keep that overgrown look. And after cleaning the desk and waiting a full day for everything to dry, it's time to add some more details to the dirt to make it look like dirt. And for this I'm going to be sprinkling these tiny little leaves all over the base of the diorama. This won't just look like leaves, it'll also look like some cool debris hanging around. I'm going to stick this down by covering the whole diorama in some isopropyl alcohol, then with some white glue we can pour it all over the top. The isopropyl alcohol will get rid of any of the surface tension. Then I've poured sand all over the top, as well as some gravel, making a tiny little path. Okay, now we enter the time where I say do not try this at home, this is probably quite stupid. I need to make the circle on the clock tower face bigger, and I realised I should have done this right at the beginning of the diorama before gluing everything down, but we live and don't learn. So using this circle drill bit, I somehow managed to actually slightly pull it off. It is quite wonky, you'll see, but we can fix that with some sanding. And all I did with some really high grit sandpaper is just go round in a circle, aiming for the left hand side to try and make this not look that bad. Eventually, I think I did it. And this is all for a good reason, because today's video is sponsored by Veil Watches, who kindly sent this over to make a real Warhammer clock tower. So later on we'll be using this very watch face as the centerpiece for the clock tower. This is the S3 Tradition watch, which includes Japanese quartz movement and an easy quick release strap system, which is swim, surf and dive proof, with the company also committed to sustainable practices while donating towards helping endangered wildlife and ecosystem, which gets the biggest thumbs up from me. And if you're interested in checking out Veil Watches, I'll leave the link below in the description and the comments. I definitely recommend checking them out. But this is actually such a cool project, I've never tried to make an actual practical use out of a diorama before. So after my fun adventure of trying to cut this circle out, it's time to prime the diorama, and it's all starting to come together, and this is when I realised the vision is finally paying off. As once we can actually prime this in black and white, I can see everything is cohesive and the design is looking pretty good. And I'm not too worried about the weird defect on the right hand side of the circle, because this has been blown up. All the battle damage, I think, kind of adds to the character. And while that dries, we can make our makeshift TITUS from Space Marine 2. So after sticking on some cool little chains, It's time to get painting, and we're going to start by base coating in Macragge Blue for the whole Space Marine, and starting to paint all of these tiny little details and under armour. Then it was time to paint his gloves, and the bolter, and any of the armour casing that is in black. Space Marine 2 is such a special game in my heart. It was some of the most fun I've had within the Warhammer universe, and it kind of really brings the imagination of what you have on the battlefield into real life. And in this diorama, I kind of wanted to think about maybe Titus and his two friends are just kind of battling in this medieval far-out planet. And if you're wondering why I'm not talking about the painting tutorial of this part, I actually just made a full... And if you're wondering what the tutorial for this Ultramarine is, I actually just made a video going through how to build, prime, and paint your first ever Ultramarine Space Marine, and I think it's a pretty good tutorial. The only thing this Space Marine isn't painted in that scheme is the enamel paint, which I'll get into soon. So after painstakingly trying to get these transfers on, it's time to coat this whole Space Marine in a dark brown enamel wash from AK Interactive. This is basically a cheat code on how to paint a cool looking Space Marine. After leaving it to dry just a tiny bit for a couple minutes, it's time to get the mineral spirits out again, and after dipping the cotton wool bud into it, we can slowly remove all of the paint we just poured on, leaving behind this brown dark wash in the recesses, making him look really dirty and grungy. And going back to the diorama, it's time to start painting, and I had to decide whether I wanted to paint it in the traditional colours like this cathedral in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is beautifully historically accurate and has these wonderful flat white walls. This is what it's supposed to look like on the box art as well, but there's a church I walk past to every day when I go to work, and it's made out of this Bath stone, and it's made out of this stone which looks really cool and gothic, and this is the paint scheme that I'm going to try and replicate. And you can even see the little clock tower on top that I'm trying to replicate. And I'll be honest, I have no idea how to achieve this paint scheme, but I'm going to give it my best go, and I think we're going to start with a nice sandy colour all over the cathedral. I also sprayed a lighter colour above with the airbrush, but the main work of this is going to come from some sponging. So to add a distressed look to the building, we're going to rip off a couple bits of sponge and dip them slowly into this kind of like dirty light brown. After slightly wiping off a bit of the paint, we're going to sponge it over all of the edges on the cathedral building. Now this is a really long process, but it does add this really nice chipping effect, and it kind of distresses and adds these thousands of years to the building. Then the next step was to grab a slightly darker brown, and we're going to keep trying to do this over and over again to add more and more texture to the building. Quickly switching over to a dry brush just to get in those nooks and crannies and the places where my sponge isn't going to fit. And while it's not looking amazing right now, I'm just going to quickly paint these iron bars just so I can start to see what other colours will look like on. And using some Games Workshop contrast paints, I can quickly paint all of the wood in pretty much just one coat. And because we have this nice warm colour behind it, it makes a really nice contrast on the wood. And the next step is to paint all of the exposed brickwork where the building's been damaged or blown up in some areas, but this will add some nice dark and light contrast throughout the building. And just like the sponge method before, I'm grabbing a huge dry brush, but this time we're going to have a nice sandy colour, which we're going to then stipple all over the building, and this is going to add some nice highlights. And it's really going to add that aged effect because we're adding these bright highlights. Now this is the one step that will turn this from looking like a sloppy mess into something that looks like someone actually tried to make it. And for this we're going to coat the whole building in some AK Interactive's dark brown enamel wash. What this does is going to seep and stain the whole miniature into a dark brown finish, which we're actually going to remove now, and this is going to reveal all of that lovely texture we've been building up with the sponges and dry brushing. And you'll see for yourself, it looks amazing. And the fact that one paint can do this still blows my mind. After using the sponge to get rid of most of the excess wash, I switched to a brush so I could really get in there and add and remove detail where I want. And it just looks so cool when you can see all the wash pooling together. And the next step is to start painting the ground and all the accessories. For this I started by painting the gravestones in what's probably the obvious colour, a nice grey. Kind of wanted this more stone-like colour, and I think it worked really well. And the next step is to paint all of the ground, and for this I'm starting with my airbrush and painting a really nice lovely forest green everywhere. We're going to start with our brightest colour and work our way down into a nice brown. Also probably the best advantage we have from airbrushing, not only it paints so quickly, but the overspray onto the other parts of the miniatures look great. Like you can already see the green splashing over on the greys, makes it look nice and mossy, as well as when it starts to spray over onto the actual building. And right now we're starting to get all of our texture and starting to fill in some areas with the brown just to pull down the colours a little bit. And the next part is the painstaking process of painting every single one of those leaves we dropped onto the model in a nice kind of lime green. As I've kept repeating about texture, it really just makes this whole piece come together, and it makes it feel more alive. And the last thing we have to do in this diorama is to paint the enemies, and for this we're painting the fearsome Tyranids, pretty much Warhammer's biggest enemy at the moment, the unending swarm of Tyranids. And for this I chose the most popular scheme, the High Fleet Leviathan scheme, which is just beautiful. I mean, come on. The white pinkish flesh with the purple carapace just looks so good. I also later on gave him a cool retro red gun, just because I really think it fits the aesthetic. This is probably one of the easiest schemes I've ever made, and if you want a full video let me know. It's like 10 minutes a piece Tyranid. And to fit it in with the rest of the diorama, I chose to also use a dark brown enamel wash, just because using this one wash over everything basically makes everything look like it's in the same universe. And the last thing we have to do is put all the miniatures in their place, and it's done! Let me know what you think of this diorama, I'm actually really happy with it. And as always, I've been Reese, make sure to like and subscribe and watch that video right down there, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!